What's going on, everyone? Happy Monday night. Welcome to your WWE Raw review for March 7th, 2022. I was kind of on the fence all day about even coming up and doing a review tonight, but I figured tonight would have WrestleMania implications. We have still not seen Stone Cold Steve Austin yet. Cody could turn up literally in any promotion at any time, and we were going to get a big explanation out of Edge for what he did last week to AJ Styles and their upcoming WrestleMania match. So I figured that plus some of the wrestling news going around today, like Becky's injury and Vader being announced for the Hall of Fame, and last night having a pretty awesome pay-per-view at Revolution for AEW, I figured there was definitely enough material to come up and do a short podcast. This will probably be quick. We'll probably hang around about an hour or so, unless 5,000 people decide to hang out in the chat, then maybe we'll stick around a little longer. Otherwise, we'll run through the news. I want to run through all of the Raw results for tonight, and I think much like last week, tonight's show, Raws, I don't think are ever going to be great. We're going to come away loving all 3 hours of what we saw because at the end of the day, WWE is still going to WWE. But we were hoping that between now and WrestleMania, we would get some decent Raws and SmackDowns. And last week's Raw, I thought was pretty good. And they backed it up tonight with, again, not a great Raw, but a good Raw. And a Raw that went by quicker than most because of the length of that tag team opener that we had. And that thing went nearly 45 minutes. So I don't know if that was done on purpose, or maybe if they had originally had a Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair segment planned for tonight, but they had to scrap that due to Becky's injury at the house show last night. So that kind of gave us a really long, fun 45-minute triple threat tag team title match where we saw brand new tag team champions crowned, got a great reaction from the crowd. Cleveland's always been a fun town for WWE. And, based on everything else we saw, wasn't great, but again, wasn't bad. And in terms of Raw, and how Raw has been known to put us to sleep for the last couple of years. Anything that doesn't put me to sleep, I consider a win for WWE. So I thought tonight was pretty good, and I loved this new persona, attitude, and look of Edge. We'll get into that here in just a minute once we start talking about Edge. But before we get into the Raw results, we'll run through the news. Want to talk a little bit about Saturday night's WWE house show that had a lot of people talking and a lot of buzz surrounding it. Nothing really newsworthy came out of that, although they did film a lot of stuff to, play on Raw and SmackDown and whatnot. And, of course, we'll discuss the announcement that Vader will be going into the Hall of Fame. I'm also going to talk to all of you guys, or say hello to all you guys in the chat, knock out these early super chats, and then we'll roll in to the Raw results, and then we'll get out of here. It's been a long weekend. We were up here Saturday for the Winged Eagle and Revolution predictions. We were up here last night after Revolution, a great pay-per-view 4-hour show that was just jam-packed and fun. Actually, 5 if you count the kickoff, and it was still, or the buy-in, it was still a really good show despite there being no title changes. Looking back on it now in retrospect, I'm glad I didn't give it too high of a rating last night. I kind of wanted to hover in that, 7.5 to 8 range. I don't think it really, warranted a 9 or a 10 or a 5-star rating from Meltzer or anything like that, but I still thought the pay-per-view was solid, and every time AEW comes on pay-per-view, they largely deliver, even if there are some smaller individual isolated incidents throughout the show, perhaps pacing, perhaps match placement, things like that maybe some people looking back might have done differently. But overall, they came through last night with a really fun Revolution. So I figured we would keep the party going tonight and talk about Raw. My next night plan to be here on YouTube will be Wednesday night for our weekly Dynamite watch parties. So if you have not joined us yet for one of those, please do. And smash that thumbs up button, do the subscribing, all that good stuff, because if the audience is not going to be big tonight, I want to get the hell out of here quick. So let me cruise over here to the chat, say hi to everybody, and knock out these very generous super chats that were waiting for me. First one from my friend, Divine Ricks. Good to see you, man, and glad you're here tonight. I know you and I were chatting a little bit on Twitter tonight, and appreciate that $10. Hey, Greg, now that we have RKOBro defending their titles at Mania and also Owens and Steve Austin at Mania, that leaves Seth Rollins. Any ideas what Rollins is going to do at WrestleMania? No idea. I think that Seth Rollins' ideas might come to us as we're talking. I laid out an entire scenario a couple of weeks ago for Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes because they really have been playing up this idea that Rollins and Seth, if they don't win those tag team titles, they're not going to have anything to do at WrestleMania, so they're starting to get desperate. If Seth can't find anything to do, I kind of pitched the idea of him just showing up at Mania, grabbing the mic, holding the event hostage, getting in the ring, saying this is horse shit. I'm a multi-time WWE champion. I've main evented this fucking show before and won a championship in that main event, technically, in 2015. The fact that I don't have a match, the fact that I don't have anything to do on this show is an abomination. It's a travesty, and that's when you bring Cody out to his Cody Rhodes music. And I talked about the connection between the two, because who was the very first NXT champion ever? And who presented the belt to that person? Dusty and Seth. And that would be so awesome if Cody came down there and said, my dad used to talk so great about you. He used to say wonderful things about how this kid is going to be the future of the business. And since I've been away from WWE, I've watched what you've been doing. I've watched what you've become. And my dad would be rolling over in his grave if he saw what his protege was up to and how you were behaving. So I've come to WWE to shut your mouth, because I think you are disgracing and degrading the Rhodes name and all the hard work my father did in NXT. And he paved the way for you, and you're supposed to pave the way for others, and you're doing a terrible job at that, and challenges him to a match right there. Maybe Cody beats Rollins, and that's how you bring Cody in. That could be, kind of fun. But Rollins is going to have to do something, and all the way up until the main event tonight, which we will get into with Owens' invitation, not really challenge, more like invitation, to Austin for the KO show. So that really took us in a big different direction there. We have reports from a tweet from Sean Ross Sapp and an article from PW Insider, both insinuating that they have heard that as of right now, it is going to be the Kevin Owens show and not an actual match. So I don't know if this is something that could break down and turn into a match, or something that could turn into an impromptu match, or something that could just be a brawl. But as we'll talk about later with Owens, it's a little bit of a letdown, because they've been doing Austin in segments at WrestleMania forever, ever since the first one he was available at, pretty much at WrestleMania 21. He did the Piper's Pit, and he's done a lot of other things since then, the Hall of Fame, and random appearances with The Rock and Hogan, and that one big Legends deal he did with Foley and Shawn a few years back. So he's been present at WrestleMania a lot. For him just to be there and be in the ring doing something, isn't that big in my mind? Obviously, that's going to help ticket sales, and Dallas is a great place for that, but it's kind of a letdown that at least right now it looks like Austin is not going to be physically wrestling, even though he probably will get physical in whatever segment they do, and Rollins could be a part of that, or Rollins can do his own thing. And I thought, since Rollins and Owens have been so linked up as a tag team recently on TV, that if Austin doesn't want to do a one-on-one match, they could do a tag. Austin could team with Cody, or Austin could team with Goldberg. Not that I want to see Goldberg or anything, but if the fans ever wanted to get, any last chance of having Austin and Goldberg in the ring together doing something physical, or fighting somebody, or facing each other, or whatever, they could technically do that as well. So I hope that it doesn't turn out just to be a simple Kevin Owens show, leaving Seth out in the cold. I don't know. But I think Seth, they'll figure something out for him to do. He's too damn good to not be doing anything. But yeah, it's at least it feels still a little bit up in the air right now. I was hoping to get some more answers, but Seth is the guy left with nothing really going on. So it depends on if Rollins now has some sort of an epiphany, much like Owens did tonight. If maybe next week he makes some last-ditch effort, some Hail Mary pass to get himself a match at WrestleMania, and maybe he targets, some megastar. Maybe he calls out The Rock. Maybe he calls out Goldberg. Maybe he calls out anybody, and then somehow these two things combine at WrestleMania, somehow, just for fun. I don't know what they're looking to do here. I don't know if they're looking to give us a segment that's really going to do something to affect the career of a Seth Rollins or a Kevin Owens, or if they're just giving the fans a fun segment that really, in the grand scheme of things, isn't going to mean dick at all. So we'll find out, I guess, in due time. But good points and good questions there, Divine. Also good to see George Morris back. Thank you for the $5, dude. Hey, Greg, how are you doing? And how is Bub? Bub is kicking ass, still doing good. Knock on wood, it's not going to last, but at least right now he's doing really well. Thank you for asking. $67 for 2 WrestleMania 38 shirts. Would you buy them? What about a WrestleMania 3 watch-along, 5 or 23? We need to do a watch-along this Sunday, and I have to decide that, don't I? 3 would be fun. 3 really would, and 23 I've talked about as well. One of those Detroit shows could definitely be done. I think WrestleMania 20 would be fun. I think WrestleMania 30 would be fun. We're going to figure that out on Wednesday night. That's when I'm going to make the announcement. I got to think in the next 2 days which WrestleMania to do. I'm going to make that decision and tell you guys what that decision is Wednesday night on our Dynamite Watch Along live reaction watch party. So make sure you're here on Wednesday if you want to find out which Mania we are going to do this week. But thanks again, George, as always, for being here. Oh, and as far as those WrestleMania 38 shirts, no, I don't want one. I wouldn't pay $10 for one. Just don't care. Deshaun, good to see you, man. Thank you for that $2 as well. So Cody returns next week to confront Seth, right? Exactly. So they could do that. I laid out that whole Mania plan, but they could just do it next week on Raw as well, because anyone know where Raw is next week? Starts with a J. So Raw being in Jacksonville next week is interesting as hell. And in terms of the Cody stuff, I like that the rumors have been changing and fluctuating, and there's been lots of different things swirling around in terms of potential landing spots for Cody. But really, at the end of the day, despite all of that, I have not backed off my initial gut feeling ever since Cody's AEW departure was made official with the statements from all parties and he was officially gone. You know, in my heart of hearts, he was definitely coming back to WWE, and I still expect him to be there. I don't think him turning around and changing his mind and going back to AEW simply because they picked up Ring of Honor is that much of a factor. Cody loves the spotlight, and like it or not, you know, as much as I think and I admire AEW for being competition, being a place for us fans to go if you want something alternative to Vince and the market is not cornered anymore and you don't have a monopoly in pro wrestling, you have options. And now WWE has direct competition here in the United States. As much as I love that about AEW, and I'm so relieved and thankful as a wrestling fan that they are here, you are still going to get the most exposure in WWE. They are literally everywhere. And if Cody wants to be a reality show guy, if he wants to be somebody that constantly does media appearances and have him and Brandy have this super couple type of aura to them, seems like there's lots of those, and there's going to be 3 of them in WWE going on at once, maybe at least 3, maybe even 4, with Corey and Carmella. And then, you know, if you do Cody and Brandy, and then you got the Miz and Maurice, and hell, you could even do Seth and Becky if you wanted. But when you think about Cody's aspirations in his real life, I just, you know, it's starting to make sense. I'm still blown away that he left AEW, how hard he wanted to fight against WWE to come back to them. But, you know, if they're willing to throw a bunch of money at him, put him in a high spot, guarantee him, you know, main events and title programs and things like that, he is going to be in front of a lot of eyeballs. And that might be more attractive to Cody, you know, than trying to survive in AEW on Cody Island like he's been trying to do. So I've never really felt that he was going anywhere else other than WWE, because like I said, WWE sure as shit wouldn't play in to any rumors. They don't like the fans to have fun at all, especially if it has something to do with their competition. And if this whole thing is a work, WWE would never play along with that either. So every time they tease him on TV, that's just telling me he's eventually coming. You know, we've had contradictory reports from multiple journalists. Some people hear that comments or that talks have fizzled out. Some hear that he's on internal creative plans for WWE, but then was taken off. We just don't know. And that's what's fun about it. I don't want to know when he's turning up. I want to be as surprised as possible. If at all possible, hit me in the face with Cody when I'm not expecting it. So he could show up next week. He could come back, or he could show up at WrestleMania. But right now, my gut is still telling me he's coming into WWE. I haven't had anything that's really firmly changed my mind on that. Even the Ring of Honor stuff didn't really change my mind, because Cody only left a couple weeks ago. You don't put a deal like that together with Ring of Honor in like one day. So I kind of have a feeling that Cody probably either knew about this or knew that it was possible and factored that into his decision-making as well. So that was probably all well known by Cody, especially if Tony Khan didn't want to lose him. He probably told him, hey, look, I'm trying to get Ring of Honor too, you know, so just something to keep in mind. If you want to stick around, we're going to have that brand with us as well. And none of that apparently was enough to get him to stay. So I think Cody is coming to WWE. That's my take on it anyway. Any other super chats before we get into the nonsense? All right, that looks good. Thanks again for everyone else who is here tonight. Do me a favor, thumbs up, and shoot me a follow over on the Twitter at GoodMicWork. And if you're not subscribed, click that button too. Let's get into the news. Only a couple of things to talk about. That MSG show on Saturday night that WWE was being so secretive about and trying to create as much internet buzz as possible turned out to be a complete letdown because the mystery opponent of Brock Lesnar turned out to be Austin Theory. Now, nobody really expected Cody to come and return on a house show, but it was Madison Square Garden. WWE has been known to do major things on Madison Square Garden house shows before. Many a WWE championship has changed hands in that very same environment and setting, and I thought it would have been cool if Cody came out in MSG just for fun. Why not? Didn't turn out to be Cody, was Austin Theory instead. The only thing they really did was run an angle at the end of the match where Heyman was in the ring. Brock got his hands on him. Roman attacked him with a chair, bloodied up Brock, slammed him on the steel steps in the ring, and stood over him holding both championships. It was an amazing visual. But in terms of, why they were so secretive and quiet about everything, I don't fucking know. So that was kind of a complete letdown. Most people were laughing at the whole situation. I thought it was pretty funny as well. And I just like that pretty much at any show, maybe not a house show, but pretty much any other show, you are going to be on the edge of your seat wondering if this is going to be the one where Cody shows up, and that's kind of fun. Some sad news to report regarding Becky Lynch. I have never heard of this injury before, and I don't know the recovery time for it, but last night in Allentown, old school WWE town, they ran a house show there, and I guess Becky and Bianca had a match, and Becky fractured her voice box, and she's in the hospital. She's going to be out for a week. She was supposed to be on Raw tonight. She posted a picture on Instagram of her in the hospital and said that she'll be coming for Bianca Belair next week. So that tells me that this injury isn't going to keep her out for any extended period of time, and it doesn't look like her WrestleMania match with Bianca is in jeopardy at all, which is good. But that's a really interesting injury for Becky to have, and it might play in nicely to the entire angle because they did the hair thing last week where Becky got whipped. It's been a bad week for Becky. She got tore up last week, and the scars and the welts, she posted pictures throughout the week of those as well, how those have been, getting redder and trying to heal. They're still there. And then she gets that injury from last night, so she's in the hospital getting that dealt with. I guess she will be back pretty soon. And I don't know what they had planned for tonight on Raw, but I assume it was something to do with the hair. And they did interview Bianca Belair tonight at Gorilla, and she was wearing a top that said, "Don't touch my hair," or something like that. So they have really been mentioning the hair a lot. Becky mentioned it in her Instagram post. Bianca is now wearing gear with "Don't touch my hair" on it. At this point, I'd be disappointed if the hair wasn't chopped off. You absolutely have to do it now. And I think that might be fun. We've seen a lot of wrestlers, Damien Priest and Edge and a few other people recently kind of change up their personas, their look a little bit. And I like it when wrestlers kind of reinvent themselves. And I would love to see Bianca with a new kind of look, maybe chop the big braid off and maybe even change up her gear slightly. I like what she wears, but maybe just change it up a little bit. You gotta Madonna yourself, just slightly, subtly change yourself as you go. I think that's the best way to do it. That's what the greats have always done. And I think doing that, chopping off the hair, would really light a fire under Bianca and probably take her to a place similar to, maybe where CM Punk had to go to beat MJF last night at Revolution, to where she's just a little bit more serious, a little bit more scary and vicious, because Bianca's a big, strong woman. You wouldn't want to piss her off. So if Becky does get the ultimate revenge, because now she's not only been whipped to shit with that hair, she got a broken voice box. So what better revenge than to do a little snippety snip to that braid, and then Bianca can really have her moment at WrestleMania. And like I pitched, I believe on Saturday in the podcast, if you do an angle with the hair, if you noticed, both women's matches are on the same night. They're both on night one of WrestleMania, which is suspicious. Makes me wonder if they could hotshot something and get those things unified on night one. But if that's not the plan, and they have nothing to do, one doesn't have anything to do with the other, then since you do have both women's matches on the same night, you can afford to have one go 5 fucking seconds. And how cool would that be? Maybe for some fans like to get disappointed. You got 2 nights, 2 4-hour shows back to back, and if we get like a 5-second match, fans are going to feel ripped off. But they probably will, because that's the way they're programmed to think. But if you think about that, Becky chops the hair off. Bianca's fucking livid. She just sees red. She's a maniac, mad woman, and she's out for blood at WrestleMania. She storms right down to the ring. That bell rings. She knocks Becky right out, pins her immediately, and wins the title in a squash. pretty cool full circle moment based on what happened to her at SummerSlam when Becky did the same thing to her. So I think all of that coming together to make that match might explain why it's on night one, because it's really weird why you wouldn't split your two women's championship matches up. And the only thing I can think of is that WWE would be worried about the fan reaction if they did like a 10-second match on night two. They would feel like they got ripped off of the women's match, or that match didn't deliver, where if they did it on the same card, they still got another women's championship match coming up in the main event. Maybe that's why. So we'll see if any of that turns out to be, but I think the more and more we go here, they're definitely going to be chopping that braid off. And the final piece of news I want to talk about before we get into the Raw results is it was announced today. Bleacher Report actually announced the news. WWE confirmed it, and that is Vader is finally going into the WWE Hall of Fame. This is awesome news. They ran a little piece for him on Monday Night Raw tonight, which was great. And I really hate to be negative or bitter or anything like that, but some of these inductions, when they get announced, it's a little bit frustrating because this is 15 years too late. You know, Vader was even politicking for it when he was still alive after he was dealing with those heart surgeries, and he was on Twitter. He's like, I'd like to go in the Hall of Fame before I die. Crickets. WWE fucking ignored him completely. You know, now it's been a few years since his death, and now they've decided to put him in. And I feel like there's been a few wrestlers like that just went in too late. The other big one, and the one that I think bothers me the most of any of them, has got to be Macho Man Randy Savage. The fact that it took them so long to put him in, and then of all people, they have Hulk Hogan induct him, which I understand that from a mega power standpoint, but from a personal life standpoint, he ain't the guy I would have picked. And so now they're doing the same thing with Vader. Great. His career is definitely worthy of a Hall of Fame induction. His run in the early 90s, 91, 92, 93, when he was a heel like that, there is not a scarier pro wrestler alive. There's nobody that embodies what, a typical pro wrestler would look like in a casual fan's mind than Vader. Just a big, giant guy with a crazy mask who grunts and beats the hell out of you. And Vader was so good for a big guy. He was athletic. Him and Bam Bam Bigelow both. Bam Bam's another guy that's long overdue for a Hall of Fame induction. This would be a good year for Bam Bam to go in, honestly. Him and Vader both. Hopefully, he'll be one that's announced. I would like to see Rick Martel go in as well. And of course, we've all been waiting for Brian Pillman, but that's going to be tough to do with Mullet Boy over there in AEW. So don't know when he's going in either. But, Vader going in at this point, I think is just, a little bit late. And like I said on Saturday, I'm a little bit, I guess, underwhelmed with the Hall of Fame only because I know it's going to suck. The glory days of the Hall of Fame are long over, when it would be the night before WrestleMania, and it'll be this long, 5-hour ordeal with these long speeches and these memories. I loved that. I know it was torturous for the wrestlers who have to work the next day, and some of the fans even would leave early or get a little tired or bored, but a lot of it was just, so much of it was fun. Those early years of the Hall of Fame, like 05, 06, 07, all the way through 2015, 16, were some great Hall of Fames with some great inductions, great speeches, and a lot of memories. And I feel that in 2019, when they changed that set to the podium setup and Bret Hart got attacked, and then after that was the pandemic, and then last year they just had that shell of a Hall of Fame that was in the Thunderdome and taped and shitty. And this year, they're combining it with a SmackDown show because of the two-night WrestleMania. You got TakeOver the next morning. So it feels like they're shoehorning it in. They're trying to cram it in. I'd try to do it on Thursday or something, or bump it to SummerSlam. Somebody brought that up to me on Twitter, or maybe it was on the stream last night. Maybe move the Hall of Fame to SummerSlam. I'd be perfectly okay with that. Might be a good spot for it, to be, in all honesty, just because of how big WrestleMania is. So I'm hoping that one day the Hall of Fame can get back to where it was, but I'm not really terribly excited for what we're going to see this year. Going to be cool to see Vader go in and whatever inductees they announce here in upcoming weeks, and Undertaker going in is going to be very awesome as well. But, part of me is just concerned about how the Hall of Fame is going to look. But at the end of the day, congrats, Vader. Long overdue, but at least he's in, because it was an absolute crime that he was not in yet. You know what I mean? Anywho, let's roll through these Raw results so I can get out of here and cook me some dinner. Raw opened up tonight with Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins coming out to the ring, cutting a promo. Owens continues to tease Austin by shitting on Texas and Dallas, and they talked about WrestleMania, and they expect to have a spot on WrestleMania because they're going to win the tag team titles in just a minute. That match is going to open up the show, and he went on to tease Cody a lot. I don't know how many times he said the word undeniable in the promo, but it was several. So again, that, lends to the evidence that I do believe he is coming in to WWE. It's just a matter of when WWE just decides to pick their spot. Is it before Mania? Is it after Mania? Or is it on the night? Before Mania, at Mania, or the Raw after Mania? It could be one of those three. We could literally see him anywhere, and there's really no right answer to it. So just enjoy this rarity that we have, is that there is a major name in pro wrestling out there that we are literally waiting to turn up anywhere, and we don't know where. That's fun. So don't get yourself too wrapped up in where the right place for him to debut is. There is no right place. Wherever they fucking want to put him is the right place. So just have fun with it. Let's see what winds up happening. But the constant teasing of Cody just makes me think that he's coming in. So they do all their shit talking on WrestleMania Dallas and all that stuff. Now it's time for the match. And there's different rules for this triple threat. Now, this is a tag team title match. It's Alpha Academy defending against RKOBro and Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins in a triple threat match. But this match, there's going to be one member of each team legal at all times. So that's difficult to keep track of in terms of who's in there and who is legal. And you can only tag your own partner. So this match went a long time. I didn't really write down spots here. I was just kind of enjoying it. However, I did crack up I think they had 2 or 3 commercial breaks here. The first commercial break was with Randy Orton trying to slam Otis on the table, but he couldn't do it. So then Riddle comes over to help him, and they both pick up Otis and slam him on the announce table, and it doesn't break. These are WWE's bipolar announce tables, where it wasn't like this past year. Didn't like Natalya on SmackDown just like smack the table and it crumbled? Natalya touches it with her hand and it breaks. Otis is power bombed on it and it doesn't budge. Typical WWE shit. But this match was fun. Like I said, fun. 45-minute long match, maybe 40-minute if you shave off that earlier promo from Rollins and Owens. I think the best part of the match easily, and you guys have to tell me where this RKO ranks on all-time RKOs, because Randy Orton is creating quite the RKO legacy for himself and still doing it at an amazing high level, even in 2022, outdoing nearly everything he's done before by countering a moonsault, top rope moonsault from Chad Gable into an RKO that was just timed and landed perfectly. Never seen anything like it. That was fantastic. Orton has had some amazing RKOs. He's caught some guys in shooting star presses. He's caught Rollins on the curb stomp. He's had a lot of great RKO counters throughout the years. So if you were going to rank a top 5 or top 10, you guys are going to have to tell me where this one ranks. But it's up there. Holy shit, that was amazing. Crowd lost their shit for that. Really cool finishing sequence here too. Owens hits Chad Gable with a stunner. He goes down, and then Rollins nails the stomp onto Gable, but then Riddle comes from behind and gets rid of Rollins, jumps on Gable, and basically steals the pin and wins the tag team titles for RK-Bro. So the crowd popped huge. Very happy to see Riddle and Orton regain the titles here. I thought for sure this whole situation would implode and we would get Riddle and Orton at WrestleMania. I think Riddle and Orton was the plan at SummerSlam, and they've delayed this time and time again. We were assuming that they would set this match up at WrestleMania, and now that's looking very unlikely. I suppose they could drop the belts between now and then and still implode and still have their match, but based on their victory promo after the match where Randy Orton dropped the F word and he said, "Riddle is my friend," and they hug. Riddle is over the moon. He could not be happier. His hero, his best friend, has now accepted his love, and this is kind of what I was expecting them to do just maybe a few months back. Even though Orton has been accepting of Riddle, he still is largely annoyed by him. And this time he really brought him in. You're my friend. You're my closest friend. You're my only friend, which means when this partnership inevitably ends, it will make the pain even that much greater for Riddle. And I have talked about maybe even a year ago when Riddle came in, as much as I liked Riddle, I was like, if he could just tone off. I even like the goofy Riddle. I love the fact that he's goofy and he says weird shit. I don't have any problem with any of that. But I don't think it would hurt him to just scale back a bit on the goofiness, to where if he could find a better balance between badass and goofy the way Kurt Angle did. So if Riddle continues to be Riddle and he's just so enamored and so happy and so madly in love with Randy Orton and their tag team, when he gets his heart broken, that might change him. That might change him inside. He might be a little bit less, he'll probably go through all the stages of grief, anger, depression, bargaining, and acceptance and all that stuff, but I think he'll be, very, very sad at first, but then there's going to be a part of him that's going to be very, very angry and is going to want retribution and revenge for how could you do that to me? How could you hurt me in that way? And I think that could be a good way and a good catalyst to get Riddle to make that transition. We've seen a lot of pieces of talent change up their personality and their persona just a bit. And I think Riddle is a guy that could benefit from something like that. So I think when all of this is done, wherever this match happens, they could push this to SummerSlam. I'd be perfectly happy with that. RKOBro, I think, is the most over act in the company. They sell merch. They're entertaining. They're great in the ring. And Randy Orton, in his promo, looked like he was having the time of his life. So they could push this to SummerSlam and have this match happen where they initially planned for it to happen a year ago. But then Orton, I think, got COVID and he was gone for like a month before they had time to pick the whole situation back up. So we're coming up on a year now that these two guys have been together. And to see Randy Orton in the ring working with Riddle, he cut a great promo and really seemed to be enjoying himself. And that just makes me so happy to see veterans like Orton, like Brock, like Danielson, like Jericho, like CM Punk, guys that legitimately right now look like they're having the time of their lives, the best time of their careers. And all of them are working with younger talent and putting them over. This Brock Roman saga, I'm assuming, is going to be Brock passing the torch to Roman, even though they've tried to do the torch passing to Roman like 10 times. I assume it's going to kind of be like that. Danielson and Jericho and Punk, all of their work in AEW, most of their work in AEW, that is, has been with, younger talent that's going to be taking over for them, when they're gone in the business, working with those guys, giving them rubs, giving them experiences, and putting them over from time to time. And seeing Orton doing the same thing with Riddle. Orton is what, a 12, 13, 14 time WWE champion, and he's working with a guy that just got brought up from NXT a year or so ago, and he's a tag team champion. He's down on the card, but working with somebody in a way that's going to elevate Riddle. We're always going to look back at RK-Bro fondly 10, 15, 20 years from now. When both these guys are probably retired, we're going to look back and say that was a fun time. So, to see Orton doing that and being able to help Riddle's career along just by association, to me, and loving the work that he's doing and legitimately having a good time. It's been fun to see Randy Orton grow up. He grew up right before our very eyes. This kid was in his early 20s when he first came in. He was given the world, given a lot of money, given championships, given attention. And, he, arguably didn't handle it perfectly at all times and had some, attitude issues like you would expect, but he grew up. He matured, as we all do. And we've watched him now, turn into, a pretty awesome professional wrestler that's had a hell of a legacy for himself and created one. And it could have easily gone the other way if he would have gotten himself in too much trouble. One of them wellness strikes disappeared. We know that. There's been some strings pulled to keep him around, and he's been very lucky and very fortunate, that he's able to be here at this stage as a multi-time champion, 2 decades now in the business, and has given back a little. Makes Greg happy. You know what I mean? After that, we had Dana Brooke taking on Tamina Snuka. I believe this match was for the 24/7 title, but who the fuck keeps track? They showed a replay of Tozawa and Tamina, who were kissing last week or whatever the hell that was. Dana Brooke gets the win here. After the match, Tozawa basically shoots his shot with Tamina, gets on the mic and calls her the love of his life, says that she's the love of his life and he wants a kiss and he loves her or whatever. So this is WWE's like 5,000th attempt at the unlikely couple storyline. Think about how many times they've done this ever since the 80s, and then in the 90s, and then a whole bunch of times in the Attitude Era with countless couples, Mark Henry and Mae Young, and Crash Holly and Molly Holly. Was it not Crash Holly and Molly Holly? Who is with Crash House? Spike and Molly. I was about to say they're cousins. They can't be together. I think it's Spike and Molly I'm thinking of. And Jesus, I'm leaving out literally like 25. Throw me your odd couple memories in the chat here, and let's see how many we can come up with. WWE literally has always done this, and it's the same thing. They even did it recently in the last year or so with Otis and Mandy Rose, remember? So they, and Beth Phoenix and Santino Marella, all this stuff. So they constantly do this. It's not fun. It's not funny. It's not entertaining. It's stupid. So now poor Tozawa and Tamina are locked in this ridiculous angle. And where's it going to go? Who cares? Then we get some weird stuff going on with the Miz and Logan Paul. Now, I talked about the Jerry Lawler advertisement on Saturday. I'm like, what the hell is up with this Jerry Lawler appearance for Raw? Why would they have him even out there? Didn't realize that it was in Cleveland, and Jerry Lawler's, of course, is a big Cleveland mark, but so is the Miz. Miz is from Cleveland. So Miz is out there to, it's not a Miz TV, he's just out there cutting a promo. And he brings out Logan Paul. So Logan Paul's back on TV. They run down the Mysterios. Of course, they got their tag team match against Rey and Dom coming up at WrestleMania. And then they bring out Jerry Lawler, and I completely just zoned out. I have no idea what they were even fucking talking about. Lawler came out with a Cleveland Browns jersey. And, of course, Lawler is a big fan of the Cleveland teams, the Cleveland Indians. And it's always funny. I always laugh at that because back at SummerSlam 1996, so for you youngins, this would be like 26 years ago, they were in Cleveland. I think the very same building they were in tonight for SummerSlam 1996. And that was right after the Cleveland Browns left and went to Baltimore. The franchise went to Baltimore, became the Baltimore Ravens. So Lawler at SummerSlam 96, I think he's working, is he working Mark Henry? Or no, he's working maybe Jake. It's the Jake Roberts match. And so Lawler, because he's a heel, he has to come out basically in his hometown or his favorite city and shit on the team that he loves with all his heart that just left. So he comes out wearing a Ravens jersey, a Ravens pennant flag, saying, how about those Ravens? Shitting on the Cleveland crowd. Even though he's a heel and that's his job, you know, I don't know if I could just go out there and shit on my favorite team so easily like that. I always got a kick out of that because then during the Attitude Era, they would always talk about what a big Cleveland fan Jerry Lawler was. I'm like, well, what the hell was that shit at SummerSlam? How do you explain that? And it's funny because Miz basically did the same thing here tonight. You know, Miz acknowledges everybody. They've talked for years about how Miz and Dolph Ziggler are both from Cleveland, and they usually use that to their advantage depending on, you know, what storyline these guys are in. So Miz talks about Cleveland, but then he does like the Jericho thing when Jericho was in Canada on Nitro and starts talking real good about Canada and then heels on him at the end. Miz did the same thing here. And this was all basically just the Oh, I'm sorry. Whoops, I got this wrong. Yeah, I just had that. I almost was about to say that the Dirty Dogs came out, but they did not. That's the next match. So all Miz did was run down Cleveland. Lawler was out there. I was moving around the room, not even paying attention because I don't care. I fucking don't care. So Miz and Logan Paul taking on the Mysterios at WrestleMania. Whatevs, and the Lawler stuff was weird, and I didn't even really see the point. After that, we had the Dirty Dogs taking on Tommaso Ciampa and Braun Breaker. Braun Breaker making his WWE Raw in-ring debut, and that's pretty crazy. It's pretty quick. Now, I think NXT is going to operate differently than the Black and Gold. They've completely changed up the philosophy in NXT. It really is kind of a training ground, a breeding ground for talent, and there's really no rule, and it's not like a separate competing brand anymore where you can't bring guys to TV. They want to get these guys some mainstream exposure, and they probably want to get a look at Braun Breaker in front of, you know, their main audience, their main roster crowd that they have weekly, because he's been extremely impressive in NXT. Everybody sees dollar signs in Braun Breaker. I will never, ever, ever in a million years, no matter what, warm up to the Braun Breaker name. I don't care where it came from. I don't care if Braun Breaker came up with it himself. It doesn't matter whose ever idea it was is an idiot. I don't care whose idea it was. It sucks. I hate the name more than literally any other name in wrestling. I've never really even been a big fan of Dolph Ziggler, even though Dolph is like his grandfather's name or something. I don't care. It sounds like a stupid name. It sounds like Dirk Diggler from Boogie Nights. And Braun Breaker with two Ks, Roman Reigns is another good example. I don't really like that name either, And so if Braun Breaker ever becomes like the next Rock or Stone Cold Steve Austin, I don't want the entire world. I don't want Braun Breaker to be a household name. You know what I mean? So I'm hoping that something happens and, they changed Walter to Gunther and all of that. I'm hoping that maybe there's still hope that he becomes Rex Steiner. Why would you just not be Rex Steiner? How in the fucking hell is Braun Breaker a better name than Rex Steiner? So they can own it. That's why, most likely. But I think that name is just so awful. I'm never going to be able to get past it. But the guy underneath that name and carrying that gimmick is amazing. My God, just close my eyes and hear him talk. It's like Scotty is standing right there. It's unbelievable. And of course, tomorrow night, they've basically got like kind of a themed NXT show, Roadblock, and the NXT title is on the line in a triple threat match with Braun Breaker defending against Dolph Ziggler and his tag team partner tonight, Tommaso Ciampa. So Ciampa's been on Raw the past few weeks. Ziggler's been turning up on NXT lately to work with Breaker and both of these guys. So it's just all playing into that. And I really don't have any issue with that. Like, I have no problem with WWE bringing up NXT guys and giving them a look on Raw. I have no issue with that now because NXT's dead. I wouldn't have loved it in the black and gold, and I didn't really love it when they would bring guys up for like one night and then get rid and not bring them back again or whatever. Anything like that I wouldn't like. But considering what NXT is now and what the point of NXT is, I don't believe in my mind there's any rule to how long somebody should wait. If WWE thinks someone is ready for prime time, then fucking put them on Raw or SmackDown. What do I care? So I don't know if there was any complaining about Braun Breaker being on Raw tonight, but I don't know why there would be. There's really I got no problem with it. And Breaker's awesome. I really do like Braun Breaker. I just hate his name. So the baby faces, of course, were victorious here, Breaker and Tommaso Ciampa. And tomorrow night, that triple threat should be pretty good, but I don't think Braun Breaker is going to be dropping the belt to either one of those guys tomorrow unless WWE wanted to put the NXT title on Dolph Ziggler for a little while to give him something to do. And in a triple threat format, he could pin Ciampa and win the title without Breaker even losing at all. So I guess I wouldn't rule out Ziggler winning the title. I definitely rule out Tommaso Ciampa winning the title. I don't see that happening, but possibly Ziggler. But I think the point here is to make and create a run here for Braun Breaker, and the dude is such a badass. I wouldn't take the belt off of him that quick anyway. So I think Braun's going to retain tomorrow, but I suppose there's an outside chance that Ziggy could hang around in Orlando for a little while longer. And Revolution was in Orlando last night. Kind of interesting that Revolution was in Orlando and Raw will be in Jacksonville this week. I think Revolution being in Orlando last night was another reason why Swerve Strickland got such a good reaction in his signing, but he's going to have good matches down there. I'm excited. After that, we had the big guy, Omas, taking on Apollo Cruz. Now, Omas and a lot of the talent tonight was interviewed about their WrestleMania spots, their place at WrestleMania. They made that a big deal tonight. Every single wrestler that was interviewed backstage, well, I don't even know their names now, whether it be the dude that did it or the girl that does it. They go up to him and say, "Hi, Omas," or so-and-so. What do you feel with all the WrestleMania spots starting to be taken up? How do you feel about your place at WrestleMania? Are you worried that there might not be a place for you? They literally asked this for everybody. There's pretty much a place for everyone at WrestleMania. I love that they're making such a big deal about getting a WrestleMania spot when WrestleMania is 2 nights long and 4-hour shows each. Why don't you go up to talent and ask them about the WrestleMania spot in 1994 when the shows were 2 hours and 45 minutes long and you were cutting 10-man tags off the show to make room for the main event because Shawn and Razor went long or whatever. Things were way harder back in the day to get booked on WrestleMania, but in the last, I'd say, close to 20 years, there has been a lot of opportunities on WrestleManias because you've got multi-man matches. You got battle royals in most cases. Mostly every year now you got a battle royal. Every year you've got multi-man matches, possibly even ladder matches. Then when you add the 2 nights thing, the only people that don't have spots at WrestleMania are people who are injured, it seems like. Everybody else at least gets to show their face somewhere at Mania, especially now that they've released, 150 pieces of talent in the last 18 months. So I found that to be a ridiculous theme throughout the night that they're worried about their WrestleMania spot. I'm like, there's the Battle Royal. Anybody who doesn't have a spot will get one at last minute. That's just the way it's always worked. So this match was not much of a match. Omas completely destroyed Apollo Crews. squashed him in a matter of minutes. And then Commander Aziz came in the ring to check on Apollo, and Omas and him kind of had a little stare down, and Omas just laughed at him and walked off. So I don't know if they're planning some, maybe confrontation between those guys. Omas, he's just I kind of disagreed with Corey Graves on commentary here. He was kind of putting over Omas. He's like, Omas is not like these big guys of the 80s or back in the day that were these stumbling, bumbling, lumbering guys. He can actually do a lot of things in there. And I was like, really? Actually, I kind of do consider Omas similar to the 80s and 80s big men because they didn't do a whole lot of moving around. They were just big clubbing blows. I think he's better than Giant Gonzalez, but I don't think he's much better than Giant Gonzalez. You know what I mean? He doesn't move around that ring any better than 1981 Andre the Giant. I think Andre was way better in the ring when he was younger and thinner. Omas might resemble more of 1985 Andre the Giant, 1984 Andre the Giant, but certainly very similar in my mind to what the big men of yesterday used to do. Corey Graves says he saw no similarities. I saw lots. Guess a differing of opinion there from me and Corey Graves. Then we get the Edge promo. Now, this was supposed to be Edge's explanation for why he completely destroyed AJ Styles last week. AJ has been temporarily written off in kayfabe due to neck contusions or concussions or anal bleeding or something's going on there. So AJ's a mess. Edge comes out, his music starts playing, but then his music stops. And we basically just go to like a blue or blue purplish Undertaker-ish type of light. Lights go down, blue lights shine on the entranceway, and Edge walks out to no music. He's also wearing like a suit. He resembled kind of Malachi Black a little bit in a lot of ways, just without all the paint and shit all over his face. So he walks very slowly down to the ring. Like I said, there's no music. It's very dark. He's looking around at the crowd. And then he gets in the ring, and I'm expecting him to cut like a 30-minute promo. I'm expecting some long-winded explanation. But he keeps it pretty simple. He basically just says that last week felt so good and that he has fallen in love with this new me. And he basically says this is the Edge that we can expect now. So his look has changed up a bit. His demeanor's changed up a bit. He was way less intense on the mic than he was the past couple of weeks. And he almost seems like he's channeling a little bit of that 2008 Chris Jericho with maybe some of his rated RKO Edge personality weaved in there to where he's still kind of, cocky and edgy, but he's not that crazy intense guy that he's been since he's come back. He's kind of like, maybe Edge from the rated RKO era, and a little bit of that Jericho suit-wearing, monotone, type of personality that he had in 2008 when he was feuding with Shawn and stuff. It's kind of like a combination of that, maybe with a little Aleister Black sprinkled in. And I loved it. And he kept it pretty simple. He basically just said, this is the new me. Get used to seeing me, and I can't wait to WrestleMania, and AJ's going to find out how dangerous I am or whatever. He kept it pretty short. I was almost getting ready to settle into my chair to really start writing down what he was talking about, and then he just ended it. And I'm like, good. I'm so glad that he kept it quick because Edge has had some very long promos throughout the years, especially since he's come back in the last two since 2020. He's had a lot of these just long, drawn-out, sit down in a chair, talk to you for an hour and a half type of promos, and this one was the complete opposite of that. So I really like this, and I'm curious to see where it goes. I'm curious to see how far he takes this new look and new idea, how long this new look has been in the works, and what his entrances are going to look like. Are the "on this day I see clearly" days over? Even though he said that, I think in his promo, he said, I see clearly now. So maybe that song doesn't really fit him now, doesn't fit this personality or persona at all. So I'm curious if Edge maybe gets a complete rehaul of his music and maybe completely changes up his vibe completely. It might be something he can sink his teeth in creatively too, to try to do something a little fun, to send off his career. So I'm going to keep my eye on this. This could be really good. I think a lot of people were scratching their heads with the turn on AJ and wow, that came out of left field. What are they doing here? But I'm glad that they're going a different direction here, and just instead of having Edge just be regular Edge, and yes, that match with AJ would be great, and on the surface it would just be a great match between two icons, nothing wrong with that, but the fact that they're going to have a little fun, that's what I would expect from professionals like AJ and Edge. These two dudes don't phone shit in. They go balls out, and I think that's what we're going to get out of this match, and that's awesome. So Edge and AJ just got a lot more interesting. We then go backstage. A distraught Kevin Owens is interviewed, and they're basically insinuating that he's going to have nothing to do now at WrestleMania. He's Kevin Owens. He's one of the top stars in the company, but because he's not a tag team champion, they got nothing else for him to do. So he then says that he's got an epiphany. And then it came to me. I know how I can get a WrestleMania match, but I got some things to work out. I'll let you know at the end of the show. So that was the big tease that he was probably going to come out and challenge Austin. After that, we had a tag team match. Now, this is the tag team champions, Carmella and Zelina, in a non-title match against Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley. Now, the stipulation here is if Liv and Rhea win, they're added to the match at WrestleMania that already exists between Carmella, Zelina, and Naomi and Sasha Banks. So, this match was so stupid. My God. I'm starting to think that Carmella and Corey Graves were paid $10 million each to be the most annoying couple in the entire world. And they cannot get this $10 million each until they achieve that goal of being the most annoying couple to ever exist on planet Earth. They're almost there. They are almost there. If you think I'm going to watch one microsecond of Corey and Carmella on YouTube, you are sorely mistaken. If I ever accidentally click on one of their videos, I'm going to personally call up YouTube and get the CEO on the phone and ask him to take my view away because I want to make sure it doesn't count. These two are horrible. God, so Carmella's in the ring. Corey's putting her over like crazy on commentary. Corey also seems a little bit in real life jealous of Pat McAfee, and I love that because I like Pat McAfee better than Corey Graves. I think he's a better wrestler. He's a better announcer than Corey Graves, and I think he's probably a better wrestler too. And if they got in a real fight, Pat McAfee would eat Corey Graves for lunch in about 5 seconds. So I just love that Corey's all hot and bothered about Pat McAfee's success. That would be a really cool match one day to have, especially since Corey Graves is cleared to return to the ring. He wasn't a bad worker by any means in NXT. So if you do start a little feud between them, which I think they're kind of planting the seeds for already, Corey has done a couple of things on Twitter. He's dropped a couple of hints and comments on commentary. I think he said something about tonight about Austin Theory being offered a kicking job by the Colts or whatever. So he's done a lot of little things like that to tease a match in the future with McAfee, which I think will be fun, but I also think that Corey might be a little low-key jealous of him too, and I fucking love that. So he's going on and on about Carmella and their wedding and all this shit, and then in the middle of the match, Carmella, I don't know, she gets hurt or something, and then she leaves the ring to go out and talk to Corey at the announce desk and get comfort from him, leaving Zelina Vega in the ring by herself. She's screaming at Carmella, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Of course, she gets rolled up and pinned. So Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley win the match. They are now added to the match at WrestleMania, making it a triple threat. And I have a feeling on SmackDown they're going to make it a four-way because now you've got 3 teams involved. And last week on SmackDown, they showed Natalya watching the monitor during the women's match or whatever. So when you think about her history with Aaliyah, I could kind of see those two coming together, making a tag team, and then also getting themselves in this match. So how much you want to bet? On SmackDown, they'll do something similar. Maybe Natalya and Aaliyah will approach Sonya and Adam, give us a match, and then if we win, we want to be added to the tag team title match too. So it looks like we're going to get a 4-way, 8 women involved for the tag team championships at WrestleMania. And if you want to know who I predict to win the tag team championships at WrestleMania, I'm going to have to go with don't give a shit and don't give a fuck for the win. So that is who I'm predicting to win in that. Then we get Finn Balor, newly crowned U.S. champion, won the belt last week in that really good match with Damien Priest, and then Damien snapped, went full-blown heel after that. And tonight, Balor's got a match against Austin Theory. Now, I immediately started freaking out because I'm like, oh, shit. Finn Balor beat Priest last week. If Priest comes out here and costs Finn Balor the match, and Finn Balor gets pinned by Austin Theory 1 week after winning the U.S. title and 1 match after they just got done pinning another champion. That's just going to be too much for me to take. But I was kind of right. Luckily, they did not pin another champion, but Damien Priest did make his presence known. He interfered in the match and attacked Finn Balor, causing the disqualification, and went on to beat the hell out of Balor again, allowing Theory to take his selfie and get all that. So we got out of that match without having to pin a champion, which was good. And I had it wrong. This was the match where Corey was kind of dropping the Pat McAfee hints. And then if you notice too, Damien Priest was wearing full-on black gear, kind of a new look for him too, perhaps. He looks a little bit different, a little bit more vicious. He's now full-blown heel. His gear somewhat resembled what Undertaker wore in like early 97. It had those like laces right here, you know what I mean? Just black and then like black tight-ass pants. Kind of looked like Taker 97 a little bit. And shout out to, I forget who it was now, son of the Minnesota Vikings logo guy, pointed out that Damien Priest has been using the Razor's Edge as his finisher, not the Reckoning. What is the Reckoning? The Reckoning's a crossroads. Something to think about. So very good point there. It's more evidence to the fact that Cody definitely is coming in if they're telling people not to use his shit. So it looks like Damien Priest is going to be using the Razor's Edge, which I like. He's, that seems like a better move for him to use. He's about Scott Hall's size. Might not be quite as strong as Scott Hall was, but he's definitely got the height. And he's got, similar size and look to Scott Hall. Much more similar than he has to Cody Rhodes. So I think using the Razor's Edge as a finish would be great. So I got no problem with the transition or the switch if that is what they are going to do. But yeah, that's another interesting thing to think about. So now that Finn Balor is U.S. champion, he's going to get a match at WrestleMania. And if it turns out just to be one-on-one with Priest, I'm cool with that. I feel like they're already setting up for a lot of multi-man matches here. We're definitely going to get that on the women's tag team side of things. Feels like they're setting up some multi-man ladder match for the Intercontinental title on SmackDown. One of the sets of men's tag team titles you would think is probably going to be a multi-man ordeal as well, or multi-team, I should say. Plus, we got the Battle Royal. We need that good one-on-one match, man. So maybe we can just do Balor Priest one-on-one for the championship. I mean, at this point, that's what I'd prefer, to be honest with you. So we'll see what they wind up announcing for those two guys. And then finally, in the main event was the segment with Kevin Owens. Now, I was expecting Steve Austin to actually appear here. I actually had another overlay done with Austin on it, expecting to see him tonight, stunning the shit out of Kevin Owens. So I made a backup plan and just put Edge on here in case Austin did not make the show. And Owens didn't get out to the ring and start talking until about 4 minutes until the top of the hour. And he went on and on about Texas, about how it came to him that he should challenge a Texas legend, and started running through a bunch of names like JBL and Booker T and Shawn Michaels and maybe somebody else. And then it hit him that there's only one guy that he needs to challenge. And there's only one, he had an epiphany, one thing that he can do to get himself on WrestleMania, and that is have the biggest KO show of all time. So they took a little turn there. And he said that Austin doesn't have the guts. And the best part was when he said, nobody's seen Austin. We haven't even seen him. We don't even know where he is. He could be 500 pounds by now. And I'm like, he's on Broken Skull Sessions on Peacock all the time. We literally just saw him. He's got another show coming up with Bubba Dudley in just a couple of days, I think. So it might actually already be up. I don't know. But he acts like the public hasn't seen Steve Austin. I'm like, the dude is everywhere. We've definitely seen him. And he goes on about drinking beer and hitting stunners and everything. It takes a long time to actually say the name Stone Cold Steve Austin, which made me think that Owens, because Owens is different. Owens is fun. I thought maybe he was going to swerve us at the very end and say Cody, but he did officially confirm that he was calling out Stone Cold Steve Austin, but they kept it kind of vague. They basically he's basically challenging him to a Kevin Owens show appearance, but his intensity and the way he was talking to Steve was more how you would challenge somebody to a match, not to an appearance. So if he just wanted him to be on the KO show, he would probably just come out and say, I want to invite you to the KO show. We'll have a great time. He wouldn't be like talking smack to him this quick, where he's actually like wanting to fight him. So they put a question mark on the graphic. That's what I used as the thumbnail here, because even WWE's acting like we don't really know what Austin and Owens are going to do. And there's been some reports now that have come out in the last few minutes that a few people have tagged me in, and one of them was from PW Insider. And this one, I have it pulled up here, where they did say that WWE reached out to Austin in late December to gauge his interest in doing a match or doing something at the show, and basically have like a one-time send-off in front of the Dallas crowd, and talks have changed, and then it had been agreed upon that he's just going to come in and do the Kevin Owens show instead. And Sean Ross Sapp tweeted something similar, that at least as of right now is what's listed in WWE, is that Austin is going to be appearing on the Kevin Owens show. Now you got to think that this should break down and devolve into some sort of massive brawl, or maybe even an impromptu match. You know how The Rock technically beat Eric Rowan in like 5 seconds a few years ago at WrestleMania? They could do something like that, where Owens continues to taunt Austin, and then Austin's like, fine, get a damn referee out here, ring the bell, I'll whip your ass, and they wind up doing an impromptu match type of thing. And I think that might be smarter for Austin. You know, Austin is a guy, like, if he's concerned at all about him being able to perform for the fans and give them a decent enough match for them to be satisfied, if he's announced for a match and advertised for a match, and we're all expecting and excited to see the in-ring return of Stone Cold Steve Austin, he's going to be under the microscope, from what he wears to how he looks to how he moves, everything. But if you do a KO show and it's just a segment and a promo, and then it breaks down into a brawl, maybe people are going to be a little bit less critical of his in-ring work. Or if it breaks down into a brawl and an impromptu match, ring the bell right now, and we get a little 90-second match between these two guys where Austin stuns Owens and pins him. You avoid a lot of things. You avoid, the criticisms that people might have for picking apart and analyzing every single aspect of his return match. You know, but if you do it this way, then you don't have to, the fans can't say they were ripped off. Oh, Austin's match only lasted 90 seconds. You know what I mean? So if they do a Kevin Owens show and they just transition it into a brawler match, that would probably be easier from a critical standpoint with Austin. He doesn't want to damage or potentially tarnish his legacy, because the lasting memory of him in the ring, you know, he shit the bed. You know, Sean has to live with himself for that, for what he did, for taking that payday in Saudi Arabia, when his final in-ring appearance was so perfect and so wonderful. And we always gave Sean so much credit for being the only guy to retire and stick with it. And then he came back just when we thought there was no chance of him ever coming back, because if he would have, or if he could have, he would have. And then he comes back in the most horrible match and worst possible scenario you could ever think of. So I think Austin would probably want to avoid doing that to his legacy and career as well. And I can kind of understand it from his perspective, even WWE's perspective. If this is their line of thinking, the KO show segment would be better, you know, and have that devolve or transition into a match than just have a full-blown one-on-one match announced. Because one of the things I've said that didn't make much sense to me is that you can actually get a match done between these two guys simply by Owens coming out to the ring and shitting on Texas. Man, if that was all it took, why didn't CM Punk do that? Why didn't Hulk Hogan do that? Why didn't any number of stars who were looking to make a name for themselves throughout the last, 2 decades come out to the ring and challenge Austin to a match at WrestleMania? If that's all you had to do to get it done, how come Owens is the first guy to think of it? So it is kind of weird why Austin would be coming back now for this, just because Austin decided to, be mean to Texas. That's really weird, So a Kevin Owens show, something that might start out like it did at WrestleMania 21 with Piper's Pit, could maybe turn into a match. Seth Rollins can get involved in this. Would be an excellent place to have Cody come out, especially if Rollins still has nothing to do, so he's just kind of tagging along with Owens, and he's in the ring with Owens when Owens is running down Austin, and then Austin warns Owens, one more, knock, and I'm going to knock you out, and then Owens lips off, Austin nails him, Owens and Seth then swarm Austin, they're beating him down, Cody's music hits. He comes out to make the save. Something like that. You could see that. Or you could see, like I said, an impromptu tag match. What if during the contract negotiations with Cody, they said, well, if you sign here, we're going to put you in a tag team match with your partner being Stone Cold Steve Austin, and you guys are going to beat Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens. I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll sign that. Sure. Give me the contract. I'll sign right now. So who knows? There's lots of possibilities here. I have a hard time believing that Steve Austin appearing at WrestleMania on the Kevin Owens show is just going to be like a segment that you would see on Raw. There's got to be something more that happens. Somebody's got to come out. Somebody extra has to come out. Maybe The Rock comes out. Maybe Goldberg comes out. I talked about Austin and Goldberg potentially teaming up, having a tag team match against Owens and Rollins. That could happen. So I think if they do the KO show, something huge better happen, because otherwise it's a segment that could essentially just be done on Raw. It's not like Austin is a stranger. He was on the very first pandemic show. Remember the party in the ring with Becky Lynch or whatever it was? So he's no stranger to WWE. He's been on TV even in recent memory. So I don't understand why it would be such a crazy thing and to see him at WrestleMania, and why that would be a big enough reason to sell an extra 50,000 tickets just because Austin's making an appearance. I kind of expected Austin to make an appearance regardless of what, Kevin Owens said. You would think a big WrestleMania in Dallas, how can you not have Austin come out and do something with the crowd there? So I just hope that this turns out to be bigger than it is, because just a straight up KO show segment, it's not that it's disappointing. It's just disappointing based on what our expectations were. We thought Austin was going to get in the ring and wrestle, and now they've backpedaled a bit and we don't know what to expect. But like I said, it could definitely lead to something bigger, especially if you wanted to tie Cody into this somehow. You now have the table set. So we will see. Overall, I thought Raw was okay tonight. Not a terrible show. Like I said, it gave me enough to come up here. They gave me enough anyway to come up here and do a podcast about it. And I think we are well on our way to WrestleMania now. So we'll keep an eye on next week. Next week should be pretty big in WWE and AEW, but the closer we get to Mania, the more possibilities we have. Raw is in Jacksonville next week, so we will see if we get any Austin appearance or if we get an Austin answer. This might be something that he does via social media. He might answer Kevin Owens' challenge tonight, tomorrow on social media, on Broken Skull Sessions or something like that. Or he'll turn up next week on Raw and give Owens not only his answer, but a stunner. So we'll see what winds up happening next week. That'll pretty much do it for my notes. Let me cruise over here to the chat, knock out some more super chats, see if you guys have anything interesting to say, and then I'm going to get up out of here. Got a $20 super chat coming in from Jimmy Fingers. I just saw a Twitter follow from Jimmy Fingers as well. Very nice to have you here, my friend. Thank you very much for that very generous drop. I am new here, Greg. I appreciate your level-headed approach to having to cover this crap. I gave up on WWE a long time ago, so I just watched the reviews. That's smart. I got nothing to add. Just wanted to show some support to what you are doing. Well, I really, really appreciate that, Jimmy. Thank you very much. I'll tell you, man, if I wasn't doing YouTube, I would be doing what you do. Some of this stuff is an absolute chore to watch. I was doing Raw reviews consistently for years here on the channel, and finally, just a few months ago, I had to throw in the towel and say, I'm not going to be here every Monday anymore. I'm just going to be here when it's important or when it's needed, because I'm burning myself out watching a bunch of shit I hate. So I would probably be doing the same thing you're doing, because I never want to give up on wrestling and I want to continue to watch and continue to keep track, but I can't give WWE 5 to 6 hours of my time every week. I'm sorry. So I'm going to try to catch up the best I can on YouTube, or listen to podcasts, or watch YouTube reviews. I would be doing the same thing as you. So happy to be able to give you these results, Jimmy. And yeah, I just think yelling, screaming, and being angry is just a huge turnoff. So that's not something we strive to do here on this channel. We try to be level-headed as best we can and enjoy as much as we can from WWE and AEW. That's pretty much the goal here. So thank you for being here. Appreciate the good and kind thoughts from you. Oh, Becky just posted a new video cutting a promo on Bianca Belair backstage. Okay, well, that's interesting. I'll have to check that out, Deshaun. Kevin, I talked about RKOBro winning the tag team titles earlier on in the podcast and laid out all sorts of different ideas and speculation about what they could do with Orton and Riddle moving forward. So rewind just a bit, you'll hear all of that. Oh, yeah, there we go. Here's some of those couples coming in. Yeah, we had Santino and Beth, Gene Snitsky and Lita, Eddie and Chyna, Jackie and Charlie Haas wasn't that. I'm trying to think of couples that were like unlikely couples or kind of comedy couples. Jackie and Charlie matched. They got married and had kids, didn't they? I'm talking about like big and little, or or some really weird odd couple, or old and young, like Mark Henry and Mae Young, something like that. So the Canes and the Litas, Enzo and Nia Jax. That's another one I was thinking about. Didn't they tease something with like Nia Jax and Moxley too, or Dean Ambrose? Did they do something like that? Viscera and Lillian Garcia. That's another good one. Well, Corey and Carmella doesn't count. I'm not talking about any couple. I'm talking about odd couples, not anybody. But yeah, there's been some crazy ones throughout the years, and I just think that it's a well they've gone to way too many times. I do not care about Tozawa and Tamina literally at all. So anyway, I'm going to stop torturing myself for tonight talking about WWE Raw and get out of here. Zane G, good to see you. Hello and goodbye, because we're about to sign off right now. But please rewind back to the beginning of the podcast if you want to hear my full review on Monday Night Raw. You guys have a good next couple of days, and I will be back up here on Wednesday for our Dynamite watch along, and it should be pretty good because there's going to be some Revolution fallout, and we got that Layla Hirsch Thunder Rosa match that is going to lead to Thunder Rosa getting that title shot on March 16th and winning the belt on Dynamite a year to the day nearly after winning that Lights Out match against Baker in 2021. So I think AEW and WWE, it's got some pretty good stuff on the horizon. It's there's definitely been worse times to be a fan than the month of March in 2022. That's for sure. Thanks again for being here, guys. Have a great next couple of days, and I'll talk to y'all on Wednesday.